Charles Purcell presents.
All right. Everybody take a seat. Take your seats. Find a seat. Let's get started. All right, welcome, students, to Fascism 101. Why are you here? Well, you are here in this class because you already consider yourself a fascist, at least in theory, and you want to become a better, more effective, more successful fascist in practice. If that does not describe you and your motivations, then, well, there's the door. We don't want any curiosity seekers in this class, and we especially don't want any undercover Democrats or anarchists surveilling this class with the idea of gathering intel. You will be quickly found out, and it won't end well for you. So, if that's your plan, again, I say, there's the door. If you think you can just coast through this class for an easy credit, you are mistaken. Discipline and rigor will be the watchwords for the semester. So, if we're all still on the same page, yes? All right, we will begin today by going over the syllabus and especially starting at the top, giving you a general overview of the semester ahead and what fascism is and what it isn't. All right. Since this is our first day together, we'll begin by taking roll. I see some new faces here. I recognize some of you from previous semesters. I know some of you are further along in your journey, but we'll try to make this relevant for everyone. The more veteran students, I trust you will assist your less experienced classmates where you can. All right. Please answer when I call you. Austria.
Here.
China.
Here.
Denmark.
Here.
France.
Here.
Greece.
Here.
Hungary.
Here.
India.
Here.
Israel.
Yes.
Italy.
Yep.
North Korea. North Korea? Absent? All right. Just as well. I think they're far too advanced for this class anyway. Poland.
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah.
United
Here.
States.
Here.
United States is eager, excited to be here, I see.
Yeah.
And right in the front row.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you're going to be one of those, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. And Venezuela. Very good, very good. Okay, we'll need to hand out the syllabus now.
Ooh, I can do it. Here.
If
let me
you
do it.
would, okay, United States, again, very eager.
Yeah.
You're going to hand out
these
the
here?
syllabus.
Yeah. Okay. Here you go.
This being our first day of class, let's begin with a working definition of fascism. you'll discover over our time together that there are many iterations and even many contradictions within the many forms of fascism over the years and throughout various nations. But there are several basic tenets that they all share. And so we're going to go through those, again, a good working definition of fascism. In order to be an effective fascist, you'll have to know what it is, what it isn't, and only then how to implement the practice in your particular domain. All right. Let's define fascism. First of all, groups. You must divide your population into two groups mainly. One, the favored group, and then the other groups can be labeled as enemies or scapegoats, to be feared. So I think it's pretty obvious what the favored group might be. Racially pure. What else do you think? Anyone?
Religion?
Yep, very good. You want to establish a state religion, or at least an implied state religion. And then moneyed interests, either rich individuals or corporations.
Excuse me, Professor. I'm confused. I thought right-wingers loved corporations.
Well, that's a good point. It can get a little confusing, and we'll get to this in just a couple minutes when we talk about propaganda. That's mostly an issue for the propagandist. You have to say you don't like the corporations because they're generally unpopular with the masses. And in order to get their votes or to get their support, often a fascist will decry the corporations and at the same time work with them hand in glove. So that's pretty typical. The same goes for rich individuals, billionaires. You want them on your side. You want their money. You want them to be happy. You want them to support you. They're an important piece of your constituency. And yet it's all a game. They understand, and you understand, that in public you're going to have to probably badmouth billionaires and the rich, the 1%, whatever, however you want to define them. So again, we're going to talk about propaganda in just a minute, and we'll get back into that. So there's your favored groups: race, religion, and money. The enemies then, and not just enemies, but the reason, of course, they're enemies is because all of society's ills are caused by these groups. They are the scapegoats, and they are to be feared. And they are, of course, I think you can probably guess, immigrants, especially minority immigrants, other minorities, racial minorities, religious minorities, even ideological minorities, internationalists, that is, any group that takes the view of, takes a more global view of world affairs. And then the poor. It's very important that the poor be cubbyholed into this scapegoat category. They're freeloaders. They want your money. They want your, we tax to give to the poor, all of that. And then finally, but maybe most importantly, a free press. A free press is the enemy of the people. All right, what else defines fascism in our working definition? Well, it's militaristic, both internationally and domestically. So on the national level, the military is there to enforce the desired foreign policy. The military is not the last option, but often the first. Must be strong, must be invincible. And then the domestic military, i.e. the police. And of course, we've seen many examples of that, the police becoming more and more militaristic. The next tenet of fascism: anti-democratic, small d, Democrats are out. Anti-democracy. So you want to control elections. Again, you want them to look fair. Although depending on your success, that becomes less necessary. I know, United States, you've had some pretty good success in bad-mouthing democracy, haven't you?
Oh yeah, we got lots of people, like, 30, 40, 50% of the population who say that democracy doesn't work or it's old-fashioned or
Yep.
yeah.
Other components of anti-democratic policies, separation of powers, that has to go. The so-called checks and balances have to be weakened. The idea that equal rights under the law for everyone and for different groups, that has to go. And again, we're going to get to propaganda in just a minute. You couch that in language that appears that you're favoring equality. But by calling, for example, white Christians the new victims, you're couching that in a way that you can maintain their position of authority and power by claiming that other groups are asking for extra rights. So, anti-democratic, unequal rights under the law for different groups. One-party rule. Again, this can be either overt or covert. The more success you have, the more overt you can become with this sort of thing, one-party rule. And then an authoritarian or charismatic ruler, strongman, someone who puts himself forward as a savior. Only I can save the nation from these enemies of the state, from these scapegoats that we've mentioned. All right. So we've alluded to this already. This is such an important part of our course here. Propaganda. All fascists, and as we've determined, there are many stripes, variations of fascism, but this is consistent. Propaganda is right at the top of your to-do list. You've got to get your propaganda down. All right, different ways we do this. We weaponize language. One way to do this is simply put as the rubber glue technique. I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. So you call your enemies fascists. You call your enemies racist, as I just alluded to. When the other side advocates for or demonstrates or protests for, demands equal rights for all the races, you can easily turn that around and say, well, you're trying to take away my rights, right? So in the case of the United States and Western Europe, white Christians are being victimized. So you call your enemies what they're calling you. Whatever they call you, just we're rubber, they're glue. Fascist, racist. As I said, you call yourself the victim. Reverse discrimination. Religious persecution. Even though you're the great majority and you have the great power, you can frame it that way. It works beautifully. Be amazed at how many people fall for this. Something like as innocuous as government regulations. You can claim to be the victim, the target. Any government regulation takes away your freedom. So the very notion of government regulation. And remember, when they call you a fascist, you just call them a fascist, although there's no such thing as a left-wing fascist. The word fascism does not equal the word authoritarianism. They're two different things. Authoritarianism is a necessary component to fascism, but it's not a sufficient component.
Wait a minute. Can't there be left-wing fascists?
No, because all the things we're going over here in the definition are decidedly right-wing on any basic understanding of the right-left continuum. It's possible to have a left-wing authoritarian, but none of these other components are going to hold, even under left-wing authoritarianism. Things like race, religion, regulations that we just talked about. All of those are going to be the polar opposite. So you can never call a left-wing regime fascist. It's not going to meet any of this criteria at all. Fascism is right-wing and only right-wing. With one caveat I'll add here, it's because under fascism, power trumps ideology, especially when you're talking about something like individual rights. In the elementary right versus left divide, you think of the right as more individualistic. But of course, right-wing fascists are very happy to jettison that ideal for the sake of their power. So you can't think of fascism as ideological as much as you do a power system. All right, we're still under the heading of propaganda. A very effective tool that fascists use. Whatever word or jargon is unpopular with the people, you just turn it around and call your enemies that word. Now, in this class, we're going to try not to get too bogged down in jargon, because that can be not only confusing, but really, really sort of destructive in understanding an issue. So we're going to try not to use too much jargon. But here are some words that, at least for the time being, are very unpopular among the populace. Radical, anarchist, fascist, communist, and socialist, just to name a few here. So anything you want to describe, anything you don't like, just call it any of those things. It doesn't matter. People have the bad connotation. And there are many ways you can define radical. There are many ways you can define anarchist. Many positive ways you can define anarchist and communist and socialist. But none of that matters. We are exploiting language. A good fascist exploits language. Propaganda and the exploitation of language are central to the fascist.
Professor, in the United States, like half the population thinks socialism is fine. They like socialism.
That's true. There is some fluidity here in language. It does change over time. So maybe one day in America, I don't think you've reached that day yet in the United States, but maybe you can't get away with calling someone a socialist. I think you still can. I think it's still quite effective. The word nationalist has already taken a turn in the United States. I've noticed some of your right-wingers openly use that word, unapologetically. They defend it. All right, how else do we weaponize language? Well, you can steal or appropriate your enemy's language and to render it impotent. The best example I can think of in modern times is the word woke. It began as a relatively innocuous reminder, warning among African Americans in the United States. Stay woke, that is, stay aware of social injustice, be on your toes, advocate for justice. And then it got appropriated by well-meaning white liberals, and the definition changed in the popular understanding to mean anything sort of liberal. And then, of course, the right-wingers and the libertarians, the Republicans and then the Bill Mahers of the world, took the word woke and completely weaponized it to mean ridiculous, over the top. That's a very good example of a great success story of fascism. The word woke has been rendered completely impotent in its initial positive definition, and it's been completely turned around to become an epithet. All right, propaganda. Finally, save the best till last. All of this playing with words and playing with language and all of that, the real thing you want to do, or the biggest thing you want to do, is to literally destroy truth. You want to just get people so confused they don't even know what the truth is. They've given up. And a couple ways to do this. The best examples being the Nazis of the 30s, Hitler, And then the next best example being the Trump administration in the United States. And that is just relentless lying. Just lie constantly. Just every time you open your mouth, you're lying. And then, of course, the famous big lie. Again, wielded by Hitler and Trump better than anyone. In Trump's case, of course, the so-called stolen election of 2020. And that I often add to the big lie the way Democrats and leftists or progressives or liberals or whatever you want to call them, the way they're defined by the right wing as being these, as the words we used earlier, radicals and fascists and communists. And I think that's another big lie that's been very successful. So just destroy the truth until people just give up. To be a successful fascist, you want your people to be nihilists. You want them to give up. They can't know the truth. It's impossible to know the truth. Don't even try anymore. All right. So we're going over a working definition of fascism, the components that all fascists share. Getting to the end here. Isolationism or nationalism. We just said a minute ago that that term has really sort of, it's taken the turn. It's hit the tipping point in the United States, I think. To be an open nationalist is kind of okay. But that's a common tenet of all fascists. Finally, two more. Calling yourself an outsider. If you're a fascist or an advocate for fascism, you want to define yourself as the outsider. You be the self-proclaimed outsider. So, yes, this sounds a little bit oxymoronic. You're labeling other groups. You're labeling other races, minorities, religious minorities, ideological minorities. You're labeling them as the others, while at the same time claiming that they have some sort of outsized power over government, over society, and that you, the fascist, are in fact the outsider. You call them the establishment. You label yourself as the outsider, and then claim that you're going to save the nation for your followers. Save the nation from the grip of these power brokers who run everything. So even though you know this makes no sense, it's entirely fabricated and ludicrous, you'll be amazed how it works to call yourself an outsider and to label all of your enemies as the elites with power. It's amazing how effective it is. And then finally, among the shared tenets of all fascists, again, there can be many variations of fascism, but what I've given you today are consistently the shared tenets of all fascists. Ultra-conservative. So, religious fundamentalists are favored. As we said earlier, one religion is favored over the others, but religion generally, the religious, are favored. And ultra-conservative views regarding issues of LGBTQ rights, sex education for children, the so-called culture wars, a fascist will favor the conservative view, even the ultra-conservative view. So that's what I wanted to get across today, a basic working definition of fascism that we can now explore throughout the semester in detail. I wanted to give you an overview today, hand out the syllabus, and we're ready to go. Very good. Well, we'll have to leave it here for today. There's a marketing class scheduled for this room in just a couple of minutes, so see you on Wednesday.
I saw the face of fascism in my own home. Hatred, arrogance, cruelty. Of course, they didn't call it fascism. They painted it red, white, and blue and called it Americanism. And here are the funds to see it through. Fantastic amounts subscribed by a few private individuals to whom money didn't mean anything anymore, but who wanted political power. Knew they could never get it by democratic means. There's a list of their names. This was the essence of their plan. Here are some articles ready for release to stir up all the little hatreds of the whole nation against each other. This was an article to be published in an anti-Semitic paper attacking the Jews. This was to be used in the Farmers' Gazette to stir them up against the city dwellers. Here's one attacking the Catholics. Anti-Negro, anti-labor, anti-trade union. Subtle appeal to the Ku Klux Klan. Here's a list of newspaper editors who either sought to occupy public office or sought to dictate who should occupy public office. And when they failed, felt that the public was a great stupid beast. Here's a list of men who served their country in the last war and were failures in business and again longed for the power of rank and the prestige of a uniform. In there are the names and addresses of the men who were designated to be America's first stormtroopers. But what was really shocking to me was the complete cynicism of the plan. Each of these groups was simply to be used until its usefulness was exhausted. Hates were to be played against hates. If one group threatened to get too powerful, it would be killed off by another group. And in the end, all these poor little people who never knew to what purpose they were lending themselves would be in the same chains, cowed and enslaved. Perhaps he was insatiable and wanted even more power to add to his glory. I don't know. But he envied the dictators and thought that all governments of the people and by the people were soon to perish from the earth. Hatred, arrogance, cruelty. I thought that it was madness. The things he'd think of, the ideas he'd play with, his frank contempt of democracy, his incredible ambition. But he wasn't mad. He wasn't mad.
This episode of Charles Purcell Presents is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, or go to the website charlespurcell.com for the full archive and all the other series in the podcast family. Follow me on Facebook, write to me at charlespurcell@gmail. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell.